Greetings. My first job is to do what I think behavioral psychologists call a mind shift. So the first part of the morning was about the technology of metal box on rubber wheels, and now we're going to shift to talking about the context in which the vehicle lives. That is to say, the social context, the political context, and the policies from governmental authorities, both national and international, and to some extent the cultural factors and the cultural context. So, vehicle in foreground, now we talk about the background. And the question that this panel is going to address is the drivers of change. So we're not talking about the driver in the vehicle, we're talking about all those social and political and economic forces that are driving the change process, and the emphasis is on the word process. So the question is, what is being changed, or what is the change opportunity? And we're going to hear 4 different presenters, each of them accomplished and noted experts thinking about these problems from different vantage points, and we picked 4 very different vantage points, so you get 4 very different ways of slicing and dicing at this problem. So let's talk a little bit about the problem statement. If we're not talking about the changing of the technology per se, we're not talking about the physics and the physical problem of stacks, durability, range of vehicle, travel, and all of those other questions that we started with this morning, we're talking here about the societal and political and economic forces that make it possible to transition to a different kind of fuel and a different kind of vehicle and a different kind of mobility system. So as one of our presenters likes to talk about, it's a shift from stuff to systems. And I want to emphasize this a little bit for you in this context. People will buy vehicles based not just on price and durability and desirability and technology, but on the overarching conditions. Where is the infrastructure for recharging is the first place that somebody is going to need to address if they're looking at an electric vehicle, and that question is not going to be answered by the auto companies. It's going to be answered by politicians and business leaders, and to some extent the public at large, who might be willing to pay for the cost of building out the infrastructure. Who is going to decide how much is it going to cost, and over what period of time are we going to finance this, or are we going to pass the burden on to our children and avoid the answer ourselves? And that's very possible. In this particular moment in history, governments have a way of essentially burying their heads and avoiding the opportunity or the challenge that's in front of them because it may be looking too expensive or too complicated. So our 4 presenters are going to address this at different levels, but I want us to keep a few things in mind as we get the different levels laid out in front of us. First is there are different actors who are involved in the change process and who are either helping to drive the change or are being driven by the change. Those include government actors, they include the consumer as an actor, they include the corporate participants as actors, and international institutions. Because the Copenhagen process, which may result in a cap-and-trade system globally or a carbon tax globally or a regime of some kind in the coming year or 2 or 3, depending on who you ask, there's some potential for that, who knows. But whatever it is, whether it's inaction or a treaty, there is a decision being made about the framework within which we think about the future of energy, the future of mobility, the desirability of different fuels, etc. So there's actors, multiple actors, and then there's multiple time horizons. Some actors, like the consumer, are not thinking in the long term. Other actors, like the international institutions, are thinking about very long term. And there's a lot of space in between. And we're going to hear, for instance, about what cities are doing in the vacuum that's been left by the fact that there aren't national strategies and national policies yet, and therefore cities have stepped into the void. And to many of us, it's been a good thing, and there are some very innovative things happening at the local level to try to facilitate the transition to a post-carbon economy, to a electric transportation system, and we'll hear a little bit about the economics of that. But we'll also hear about the broader natural resource context. How, for instance, does water play an integral role in the future of our energy system and vice versa? The future of our energy system interact with and ultimately have a real impact on the future of our water supply, which is a pretty vital component of the rest of the story for humanity.